Hey, Robo here with Smash Factory. I'm so glad you're joining me today. This is our, getting started quickly video. This video is to help you get started quick and get going. It's basically a culmination of a lot of the more in-depth material that we have on our training course. We have Smash Factory Academy was launched this last year as an attempt to build out course materials for our clients that would help them understand the process that they're about to go through. This, we noticed that when we visited with potential clients or people who had ideas, inventors with great ideas, that there was a lot of hesitation to get started. Most of the hesitation comes because they just don't know what to expect. They don't have that confidence to pull the trigger. Some people have been sitting on their ideas for years and just scared to get moving forward. And we learned that if we could give them a real good understanding of what to expect and how to go through this process without making mistakes and getting screwed, and that it really is a methodology of moving from one phase to the next phase to the next phase, that some of those people got off their butts and actually got started that wouldn't have before, because they had that information. And we originally intended just to, point them to someone else's. We didn't want to be in the education business, but we didn't really find anything out there that met our needs. Most of the material we saw available in the marketplace was built either by incubators or large corporations, or it was by niche providers, patent lawyers and things like that, or licensing firms who really had an agenda for it and selling their services to the inventors. And we didn't really have that agenda. We really just wanted to provide good information that gave them the tools necessary, so when we were talking about certain parts of the project, that they knew what was coming up. They knew how to navigate that pathway, and it really helped us as much as it helped them. And so we decided to kind of get formal about it. We launched Smash Factory Academy as part of this process. And we went back and reverse engineered a lot of the projects that I've worked on over the past, a lot of the Smash Factory people that have a lot of experience. And we went through old projects and defined, what worked, what didn't work, and created, sort of a best practices aspect. It was, a good friend of mine, he's a special ops guy, very high level special ops guy, and he says that in the special ops division, they call that debriefing. After they do a mission, they'll sit down, cool heads, they get to reverse engineer what had happened, and they determine, what is it that made that mission either successful or not successful, how can they improve going forward, and of course they do it because it's a life or death situation. And when we do it, it's because, it's not, no one's going to die in this process, but, the project could die. There are some mistakes that you can't recover from. And if you have more information going forward, stepping into this, you're going to reduce those amount of mistakes. You're going to reduce the costs involved, and you're going to feel a lot better about what you're doing. And so we put together this information from those old projects. These are real world application pieces of information and processes and tactics, mostly strategies. One thing that is missing in a lot of books that are about inventing, sure, they're showing you, sort of the scientific method for, steps to go through, but they're not really giving you the strategies to overcome obstacles. We use the analogy that inventing is a lot like climbing a mountain, that sure, you can just set off and head for that mountain, but your likelihood of getting to the summit successfully without something disastrous happening along the way is pretty low. If you're going to climb a mountain and you're really serious about succeeding, the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to sit down and you're going to want to plan your route. You're going to want to envision the different pathways you're going to take. You're going to want to have the right people on your team. You're going to want to take advantage of the expertise that's out there, find guides who are experienced. You're going to want to get all of your packs ready, all your food, your essentials, the gear involved. Putting all that together, you need to know what is going to be required. And so we developed, the online training course, it's about 15 hours or so and growing of videos explaining the entire process, what to expect, and mostly what strategies you should take to pivot when you hit hard times. And we feel that that was a really unique angle to help you out. And so we developed this course, and I realized that, you know, that takes hours of dedicated time to learning it, because most of the people who go through this course, they don't just watch it once, they watch different sections several times. So it does take some time to put it all together, and I wanted to get people started right away. So we developed this kind of a fast start video to getting going, quick start guide, and some of the key essential strategies and points that we'll have in the video, which will be very important to you, is the big idea of this presentation is how successful inventors plan ahead, make better decisions, avoid mistakes that kill while developing their idea to finished product. So, you know, like I said, successful inventors, a lot of inventors who have finally cracked the code, they tend to do it again and again. And it's because they know the formula now. And once you know the formula and the process for doing this, and you know how to navigate that, your chances for success go way up. And you have to understand right now, you know, the chance that an inventor is going to succeed, well, first, the chance that an inventor with an idea is going to actually pursue it is phenomenally low. It's like 1 out of 10,000 people who have a really great idea will try to pursue it. And only 1 out of 1,000 of those will succeed. And later on, we're going to get into some real metrics in the actual program about the success and failure rate of, you know, Shark Tank and Kickstarter projects and things like that, that it really wasn't about the idea, it really was something else. So part of this process and part of this presentation is I want to show you the secrets. And so secret number 1 is that anyone can do it with any idea if you follow the right recipe and work with the right people. So this is really important to know. We normally sit down with new inventors, and the first thing that they're really wanting to know, they want to pitch their idea to us to gauge whether this idea is valid or not. It's a validation process of knowing, will this idea work? And there's even a lot of firms that's really all they do. They charge you to validate your idea, and they'll go do the market research, and they'll compile all the facts and figures, and they'll come to you and they'll explain to you whether or not this idea is worth pursuing. And we necessarily don't agree with that methodology, because our statement is there's really no bad ideas. There are good ideas, and then there are great ideas. But it's typically not the idea that is important. And when I say anyone can do it with any idea if you follow the right recipe and work with the right people, that's really part of the paradigm that an idea's success or failure is really in your hands. Some of the most weird and dumb ideas that I've ever heard of are multi-million-dollar sellers. You know, if you came to me and said, hey, I've got this idea, essentially what I want to do is I want to take a piece of plastic that looks like a board, and I'm gonna attach a rubber mechanized fish on it, and if you push a red button, the fish is going to turn to you and sing a song. And I'd say, oh, well, you know, good luck with that idea. I could have done all the market research and all the testing, and I could have used my own opinion and experience to try to validate the idea. But the truth is, and the reality, the only reason that particular idea is selling over $200 million in product now and continues to sell is because the guy behind it knew what he was doing, and he knew who to work with, and he followed the right process, and he was tenacious. And that's one of the things we'll also go into is some of the attributes of a successful inventor. But I do want you to know that it doesn't matter your situation. Someone has been in your shoes, pursued their product, and was successful. So anyone can do it with any idea if you follow the right recipe and work with the right people. We're going to explain and break that recipe down into step-by-step features and show you some secret sauce stuff that you can apply to it. Another secret number 2 to this, is that the inventors who succeed like the ones seen on Shark Tank and Kickstarter, don't always have a good idea. They have a good strategy and they're well prepared. When we first wrote that, we actually wrote the reverse of it. The ones who fail don't have a good strategy and they don't have a good idea. But we wanted the positive spin on here. I'm sure if you're an inventor, you've seen Shark Tank and you enjoy that show, and you'll understand what I'm saying is that the inventors who present on there, and it doesn't really matter about the idea. Of course, they want the investors, the Shark Tank itself, are looking for good ideas that fit their niche, that they know they can help out with. However, the people that they turn down, that might be the perfect product and idea for their niche, but they turn it down because the people pitching it, they don't have their shit together. They don't have the cost of goods done. They don't have their market strategy figured out. They don't have the basic fundamentals required for success already determined and right there at the tip of their fingers and on top of their mind when they're asked those tough questions. And I'm going to tell you that they could have found success in that Shark Tank room if they would have had that. Same with Kickstarter. There are some statistics we'll reveal later on about the failure rate of Kickstarter. So Kickstarter has a marker that they publish, which is how many projects come on Kickstarter and reach their goal. And they consider that their success and failure paradigm if you reach your funding goal. However, what they don't publish is how many of those projects that reach their goal actually deliver on their product, deliver to their backers. And that number is extremely low. The reason it's extremely low is because they didn't go follow the right process. And if you speak to a very experienced product development expert, you'll hear this story hundreds of times, that what inventors typically do is that they contact a manufacturer or they contact a product development firm and they say, here's my idea, I want to do, this is the thing that I want to build, how much for a prototype and how much to get it made. And what you're going to find is the ethical vendors and the ethical service providers in the market are going to come back and say, I can't tell you that. It would not be wise for me to give you price on prototype and a price on manufacturing. If you get a price on prototype and manufacturing at that point, it's not going to be correct. It's going to be wrong. And that's where you'll get in trouble. Sure, they might be able to make your prototype. Then you'll take your prototype and you'll go get on Kickstarter and you'll have a successful campaign if you do it correctly and you follow the right Kickstarter program or the crowdfunding program. But then when you go into production, you're going to have your ass handed to you. And we have hundreds of stories. I have personal friends who have had a nightmare because they didn't follow the right process and build out the architecture correctly. So when they finally got their product made, it cost 3 times more than what they anticipated. And therefore their profit margins and their entire pro forma of their financials was incorrect. But if you follow and you have a good strategy and you're well prepared, you will find success. Secret number 3, the most consistently successful inventors know how to find and hire the best people with little to no money, and also find the money they need to get through the hard times. So these are also secrets that most people are not going to tell you about. Is how do you need to have good people, the right people. It's so important. People number 1, product number 2, process number 3, promotion number 4. That's a very successful step by step. So what do you do if you have very, very low funds and little funds for your project? So how do you get the right people? And there are really successful ways to acquiring that talent like never before. The new internet paradigm and what they call the gig economy has opened up an entire pool of extremely talented individuals that you can leverage your project through various ways to get help from these people, add them to your team, and build out your project step by step. Like I said, do phase 1, then phase 2, then phase 3. You can have them help you through these phases. and find success without having to come to the table with a wad of cash. And so we're going to explain some of those different details, and also find the money they need. This is, again, goes back to this here, is that if you have your presentation right, and you have your numbers right, and you have a strategy that's a winning strategy, there are people out there who will want to get behind it. It's funny when we put together the Smash Factory business model, the first thing I did was I went out and talked to a whole bunch of inventors that I'd either worked with in the past or that I knew were out there, seeking a way to get their projects done. And the first thing that they would say is that they don't have enough money for their project. And it is, finding the right capital for your project is the #1 deal killer. If you don't have the money to go through it, it takes money. If you don't have the money to go through it, then you have to go find that money somehow. And so the presentation you put together, the strategy and the business model is very, very important, because you don't have enough money is the #1 thing I hear from inventors. The #1 thing I hear from investors, people who back projects like this, is I don't have enough deal flow. And when they say I don't have enough deal flow, they mean quality deal flow. And so there are all these investors out there who don't have enough, they don't make money if they don't place their money somewhere. They have to put their money to work. But they're not going to put it behind, ideas and projects that don't have all their ducks in a row and can show them quantifiably a successful business model. And so if inventors need money, investors need deals, there's a way to fill that gap. And we're going to show you how you can create a winning presentation to find the capital, and the right kind of capital at the right phase. Because we'll also show you that there are different investors and different levels of money that you're going to need, and there are different investors that fit every one of those niches, and you have to speak their language and prepare for them. So this is basically how successful inventors plan ahead, make better decisions, and avoid mistakes that kill. Mistakes are what kill. Bad decisions create mistakes. Mistakes are what kill your project. And while developing the idea from finished project. So, I'm gonna, we compiled all this information also into a book, Bring Your Idea to Life, how inventors take an idea from concept to finished product without getting screwed. We think it's a quality book. It gives you a lot of the information that the videos do. The videos are just easier to watch, but a lot of people really like to tear apart a book, which brings me to, my humble, kind of embarrassing story of my own, which will help give you context with all this. So I'd helped some large corporations. I used to own an advertising agency in the Dallas-Fort Worth market that we grew it to one of the top 10 agencies in Texas. And we were specialists in launching products and bringing new products to market. So our customers were, Sony Electronics, and we helped launch giant billion-dollar projects like the Sony Handycam, the mini disc. And in that process, I got to learn from giant corporations their methodology and work with some of the best engineers, industrial designers, and marketing people in putting those together. We don't have that budget. That's one of the things about our course and why we put it together, is that isn't applicable for an individual inventor. Those access to that pool of money and those resources isn't a viable option. However, there are a lot of the strategies that they use, there are a lot of the back-end methodologies they use that are completely applicable for us on how to project manage correctly, how to walk through this process. And so, I've pulled from that knowledge base and developed this so that an individual inventor can go through this. We've taken all that information, and I actually first put the book together first before we made the video series. And so the reason I'm telling you about all that is actually not for the book. it's for my first project. So I had probably a lot like you all, I have been coming up with invention ideas for a long time, since as long as I can remember, since I was a little kid. I was always thinking there's got to be a better way than this. I'd run into a problem, I'd want a solution, and so I would hammer out some sort of workaround. And I realized that, after time, I'd built up this sketchbook full of these ideas. And after I'd sold my advertising agency and I went into the internet marketing business, I'd launched an internet marketing company, and it wasn't fulfilling me personally. And so I decided to pull some of those old ideas out and pursue them. That was really how I got started, that I was already a professional with a job, with a company that I was running. And so nights and weekends I would work on this project. I was an avid reader. I like to read a lot. And I'm one of those, readers who I, earmark the pages, sticky notes, I write in the margins, and I keep this litany of my thoughts and about the book inside. And one of the ideas I had was that, it's always hard. I got to go to the bookshelf. I got to figure out what book I was reading. And then I got to dig through it to find the notes that I had taken on that book. And so I came up with this really simple idea and I also had a notebook. I came up with a simple idea and I called it Smart Marks. And it was this, it's very simple. So it was just a poly backer with some notebook attached to it. And this wasn't the original version. They came in all sizes, and I handmade them in my garage, in my workshop, and I just spray glued them on, and I started using them, and I really enjoyed them. And some of my friends saw them, and they wanted some as well, so I would make a batch for them and give them out. I sold a few. And so when I decided, when I wasn't being fulfilled with the internet marketing company and wanted to pursue some of my business ideas, I figured out that this was probably a good one to start with, because it was a very simple product. It should be easy to make. Almost any printer should be able to make this. I knew the printing process. And so this was my debut project. And the reason I say it's a little embarrassing because I had no idea how hard that process was going to be. I began with the intent to patent the product and then go through the process and find a licensing partner. So the first step that I did was I fine-tuned out how to make these properly, and then I went to a manufacturer and we worked on what is the process that would be used in to be able to mass make these. And I learned quickly that it was way more difficult than it looks. It's a very, very simple piece, but in order to make it align properly and to come together and for the glue to be put on there right and everything to run in a mass market setting, that we actually had to retrofit some machinery. We had to have another piece of machinery made. And it went from, hey, I ought to be able to get these put together and start making and sell these in a month, to 6 months later, we're still working on the details, and it became way more expensive than I was going to be able to afford. At the same time, I was working on the patent process. So I had, did a little research, and this is pre-internet. You have to understand, doing research on providers for things like this, you had to go to the Yellow Pages, you had to go to the Thomas books, which is a big giant directory of manufacturers and service providers and production partners, and find those people. And so I was using those directories to help find people, and I found a patent lawyer in Washington that he was going to help me get a patent on this. So I sent him the idea, an overview of what I wanted, talked to him on the phone. I actually mailed him one of these, and he said, yeah, no problem. This is a very simple thing. I looked online I looked it up, and I couldn't find anything that was like this. I think that we should be able to get a patent on it. And he quoted me a price, and it was within my budget. I want to say it was $1,500 to patent this product. And so we started that process, and once I got started on it, I immediately started getting frustrated because it just took way more time than I anticipated. He didn't really give me an expectation of what to expect through this whole process and what he actually delivers. Of course, I didn't even know to ask. I just thought, patent, you do it, I'll pay you $1,500, you'll give me a patent, I'll put it on my wall, and then I'll try to go make some sales or get a licensing deal. That's not how it went at all. How it went was he wrote up the patent application and sent that to me for review, and I'd already paid him my $1,500. He sent that for me to review. I sent it back with some of the changes and additions that I had, and then he sent me an invoice for $1,000. And I contacted him and said, hey, I've already paid my $1,000. He said, no, that $1,500, I already paid my $1,500. He said, no, that was just for me to assemble the application. Now you need to give me another $1,000 to add these edits to it. And so I said, okay, and I scratched out another $1,000 and I mailed it off. And then he made the edits and he sent me another copy. I went through it looked fine. I didn't want to make any more edits because I didn't want to spend any more money. And I said, hey, that looks good, let's get started. And then he sent me another invoice. And this invoice was to actually apply for the patent. And there was another $1,000. And so as time went on, I realized that his $1,500 proposal to me wasn't actually to get me a patent. It was for the first step. And then he charged me for the second. And he essentially, withheld that information and continued to ding me. And once I kind of got going into it, I really, I needed this patent, or I thought that I needed this patent, and so I continued to send him checks. And in the end, I ended up spending way more than I anticipated. I think that the final total bill was between $8,000 and $10,000 to get my final patent completed and my application in. And of course, I also had to pay the patent fees that you pay the United States Patent and Trademark Office. So all in, I'd spent 8 times more minimum of what I actually thought I was going to have to spend on it. So then, once I had, and then the patent wasn't issued yet. Then I found out that you don't just apply and then they send you a patent. Is that it was just in patent pending. Now it had to go through this transition period of the patent office was going to have to review the application. There would be additional charges because they would send back changes or concerns about the application, and then my lawyer would have to make those through my approval, and every single time there was a check had to be passed between him and I to get through the end of the process. So once we'd actually made the final patent application, I took the approval of the application, which I don't have the actual patent. I just have the number that says I have put in the application, the utility patent. And I started going around trying to find a licensing partner. I realized that all my money that I intended to use for developing my own product was gone. So I just started making phone calls, trying to find someone to help me bring this to market and license it from me and recoup my money. And so I started with the big manufacturers of notebooks and started making phone calls. And after about 10 phone calls, I found a company called AMPAD. They were one of the largest legal pad manufacturers in the United States, and they were in Plano, Texas. It was nice and close. So I started making trips up there, presented to their marketing and sales teams, and lo and behold, they were interested, and they decided to go forward with a licensing deal. And that's where I learned another lesson, hard lesson, is I didn't really know or understand the licensing aspect. And so during the licensing program, I was going to rely on their lawyers to draft all the information, and I was just going to review it because I had no more money to pursue the idea. And so they sent me a contract. I looked it over, it looked good. I think that my royalties were 8%, and they showed me how much they were going to charge. And so we inked the licensing deal, and then they sat on it because I did not have verbiage in the licensing contract that they had to pursue it at all. And so they essentially saw the value in it, but they didn't really want to pursue it. They wanted to just sit on it. And there was really nothing I could do. So they sat on that. It was a 5-year contract. Luckily, they went into bankruptcy on the 3rd year and were purchased by a private equity firm. And so that contract ended when they went out of business. So I essentially got the access to my product back. And later on, I'll show you, it sounds like a terrible deal, and I really had a difficult time, which I did, but it was a huge learning experience for me, and I realized a few things. One is that I can't take for granted, just because it's small and looks easy, that it's going to be an easy process. The other thing was I didn't have anyone to mentor. I didn't have any good people on my team that I had recruited that could have helped me through this process. And so other thing is that if I would have known and understood all of the elements involved in every one of those aspects, the manufacturing, the licensing, if I would have had that knowledge base, I would have made way better decisions, and I wouldn't have been out all the money. And we'll go into a lot of information about patents and trademarks. We are not patent and trademark attorneys, but we're going to come from the angle of this is what we've experienced and how you can navigate that process. So I wanted to show you this and I want to end it with something else, because I know it sounds like a real downer, and if you're a first-time inventor, you don't want to just hear those kind of stories. But in the long run, this little project right here, I have since licensed it 4 times. It's on its 4th license right now, and I've also made it, manufactured and sold it myself, and I have made several $1,000s on this little project over the last 10 or 12 years. It is no longer under patent protection, which I realized later on I didn't ever need to have a patent on it, and I could have taken that money and spent it just marketing the product. But just something as simple as this has been an amazing monthly check that my family and I get to this day, and I want to show you ways that you might be able to do that and navigate that process way better than I did. So the reason I wanted to share that with you is it kind of give you an understanding of how this all ties together, where we come from, and that even the smallest of ideas can gain you big success income, and that pursuing these projects, it's something very small, but I'm unbelievably proud of every invention that I've done. I'm very proud of that one because it was my first one and it was so difficult. But now it's being sold online through a new licensing partner, and the feedback, I get on there once in a while and I go through their customer feedback on their Shopify website, and the Best Self company who licensed it, the feedback is phenomenal. It brightens my day. If I'm ever having a bad time, I go read that feedback, and it gives me more energy as I'm pursuing new projects of my own. And it's also a great story that I always share with inventors that I'm working with, that one, follow the right process, surround yourself with good people, and make good decisions along the way, and you will find success. And you just have to have that tenacity. So I think what we should do is we should kind of get into the meat and potatoes. Let's get started on some of the course material, and I want to show you, step by step what we're going to go through. To start with, we're going to go over the idea itself, the validation process. When I say validation process, I don't mean is it a good idea or a bad idea? Can it make money? Can it be made? Is it the right time? How big is the market? Things like that. Then we're going to go into the actual protecting the idea, give you some real great inside information on how to keep yourself safe, how to make sure that your product or your invention idea is going to be safe, because the world out there is way different now. There are people on Kickstarter who are just trolling Kickstarter for ideas to rip off, and they know that they're going to be able to bring those to market. We'll share some actual case studies of products that have went on Kickstarter before they were ever even funded. Someone else made them and had them up on Amazon for sale. And so we're going to show you techniques on how to avoid that in our protecting your idea phase. Then we're going to go into funding the idea. We're going to give you some, basic overview of the funding aspects, the types of funding, the different areas where you can go find funding, how to put your presentation together, how to make sure that your cost of goods are all, your financials are in place, and going through that step by step. And then finally, we're going to get into the actual making the idea. We're going to reveal the 6 steps to product development, the different players who are involved, the people who you're going to have to help, rely on to help you put together your prototypes, your 3D drawings, how to actually go through the manufacturing and prototyping phase to finally having your master sample and your finished product so that you'll be able to take your product and get it to the market. And so let's get started on that. I'll see you in a minute. Okay, let's get started on the phase 2 of the free training video. As you can tell, the whiteboard is magically transformed into something new and better. I was I wanted to be able to do some diagrams and drawings for you in real time, and the whiteboard wasn't going to let me do that. So we've transmorgified the whiteboard into the flip paper. So as we mentioned, we are developing this to explain and show how successful inventors plan ahead, make better decisions, avoid mistakes that kill while developing ideas into finished products that can make you money. So, which is, really the end goal of all this. I mean, ideas are great. I've had them for years, but making money, trust me, is much better. And we also wanted to reveal 3 different secrets. Secret number 1, anyone can do it with any idea if you follow the right recipe. By the way, you can tell I'm getting busy now. I'm rolling up my sleeves. We're going to go to work. Anyone can do it with any idea if you follow the right recipe and work with the right people. And I hope to demonstrate some of that, or not hope to, I will demonstrate some of that as part of this process. Secret number 2, inventors that succeed, like ones you see on Shark Tank and Kickstarter, don't always have a good idea. They have a good strategy and they're well prepared. As I mentioned, you'll notice that the people, when they get excited about a project, sometimes you sit in the audience and you think, this product doesn't make much sense to me, especially ones that haven't hit the market yet. And the ones that fail, even if they have market share, even if they're outselling, are typically the ones that the sharks have beat up and destroyed on the set. So we don't want to be those people. We want to avoid all that. We're going to have our ducks in a row. We're going to go in with a good strategy, and we're going to be well prepared. Secret number 3, the most consistently successful inventors know how to find and hire the best people with little to no money, and they also know how to find money they need to get through the hard times, and there sometimes could be hard times. So let's get started and get to work on how this comes together. So essentially, what I'm going to do, I talked about the Smart Mark product that we mentioned in the first section of this video. Smart Mark product is a bookmark that you keep notes in, and it also keeps track of your page in a book. And then instead of having to dig through the book and find your notes on the book, you can just pull the Smart Mark out, and it's all basically your own Cliff Note version that you can keep with every book. And I've licensed this product at least 4 times now, and it's currently licensed by Best Self Company, some friends of mine, and they're doing an amazing job with productivity tools. And one of the things they wanted to add was the Smart Mark product, and I'm very grateful that they picked it up and brought it back to life. So, and the product that product taught me a whole lot. The next product that I tried to pursue was a product to help you carry heavy loads for furniture movers and people who work in the outdoors construction. I created a system of products that use tarp and straps and these quick release hooks that lift heavy objects, and it was I launched it almost the very same time I had launched the Smart Marks product earlier. And again, it was a very difficult learning experience, but one that I hope that you can benefit from. So essentially, the Grizz Grip product that I had invented, I did it completely the wrong way again. You know, like I said, I launched it very, very, you know, in close to the same time as Smart Marks. And so I hadn't yet learned a lot of the processes. And I had read the how-to books and a few things like that, and I'm always trying to learn, but I was more interested in getting it started. And I pretty much did it the exact opposite way that you should, or that we recommend now. What I did was of course I came up with the idea, and I had all my sketches. You know, I kept a sketchbook full of sketches on this. And so when I was ready to get started on it, I contacted a manufacturer. Okay, I wanted to know, how much are you going to charge me to make the prototype, and how much are you going to charge me to manufacture these? Okay, seems like logical questions, right? So how much are you going to charge me for a prototype, and how much for manufacturing? I knew I needed a prototype of some sort to be able to go out and demonstrate the product and make sales on it. And how much is it going to cost me when I make them? Well, I didn't actually provide them any of the real information that they are going to need to be able to give me proper pricing for the prototype and manufacturing. The estimates that I needed, that I really needed to move forward, they were not going to be able to provide me those. However, the manufacturer that I went to, they had a fairly good idea of what it was that I was asking for, and they knew, and I knew because of their skill sets, that they could make the product for me. And so they went ahead and provided me a price for that. So I got my cost of goods for the product, and I knew what my prototype was going to cost. And because this wasn't a very big project, and it was damn sure not complex, it was nylon straps and bent metal. And so I thought, well, let's get going. So I pulled the trigger. They wanted $800 for the prototypes, and they told me that my end product was going to cost $4.87 each. So I would have a little kit, sort of a starter kit, 2 handles, 1 strap, $4.87, my cost. I went ahead and what I did was I keystoned it. I was going to charge $10 pretty much. And I took $800 out of a savings account to make the prototype. Well, when it was said and done, and I finally got my prototype, the first ones were god-awful. They didn't meet any of my requirements. They were too lightweight. They didn't hold the straps properly. And so I had to make new ones. I needed new ones. And then they charged me for the new ones, and so on and so forth. So by the end of the day, much like the Smart Marks, I'd end up spending $2,000 to $2,500, somewhere in there, on those. Now, this is years ago. So I know you're sitting there thinking, "What? This guy's dumb." I mean, he's doing it again, and which I did, and I was. I was not dumb. I was ignorant to the process, which is what we're going to help you avoid. So essentially, what happened was that my prototype costs were much, much higher, and this was nowhere near where it was going to be. His end cost was going to be $18 delivered. And at the time, resources for manufacturing where we were, and I was sourcing locally, I was using a local shop. They were outsourcing all the components for the straps. They were outsourcing packaging. Everything was different back then, and it was costing them way more, which they just passed that down to me. So when I was out pre-selling this project, I was assuming that I was going to be selling it for $10 to my distributor level. Instead, $18 was my cost. And so if I keystone that, now I'm looking at $32, right? That's just keystone. So I'm looking at $32 just keystoning my project. So as you can tell, it was a folly from the very start the smallest mistakes in the beginning can derail a project. And so you're going to have mistakes along the way. I have never worked with anybody, no matter what level of professional, with how much experience, and there will be mistakes. It's usually in communication, which we're also going to cover. But you can see how the trickle-down effect of any slight mistake, this could have been $1 off, $1 more, and it would actually exponentially get bigger as we went down. So that was, you know, of course, that project's still in the hopper, long gone. Might be pulled to life again. Lately, we've had some interest, but I'm going to use a new project we're working on currently. It is basically a mobile desk, mobile standing desk. So I have been using a standing desk. It's sitting back over here for quite some time, and I really love the standing desk. I love the benefits that I get from it. It makes me feel better. My legs are getting stronger, and the standing desk market is growing like crazy. I looked at the current mobile desk for standing desks, and there was nothing out there that I wanted, and so I concepted out, you know, combining a desktop with a tripod, and created some mock-ups. So this product is going through its iterative phases now. And I'll explain exactly where it is as we go. And, you know, essentially with the adjustable legs, you can easily put it together, drop this on, adjust it to whatever height and variation you want, and go. Now, this isn't going to be the finished product by any means, by any stretch. The end one will be sexy, and we have designed and developed a connector mechanism as well as a new tripod design that we can patent for this process. But I'm going to use that as an example to show you the step-by-step procedure of doing this correctly. And so the very first thing that I should do, instead of jumping in and going out and trying to get prototype and manufacturing prices, the first thing that I need to do is take a breather, take a break. I need to sit down and define what I'm really wanting to do. What is it that I want? I need to figure out what my end goal is. And by doing that first, I'll make a lot better decisions. It's akin to, as I said, going and climbing a mountain. You need to be able to sit down and envision that journey in your head, and you need to see that end goal. You need to see that summit in your mind. And I always like to sit down and see the summit as it's my finished product. It's sitting on a shelf. It's for sale in a retail store. The packaging's beautiful. The product looks incredible. People are standing up to buy it all the time. It's moving off the shelf. It's got an end cap header display because it's so popular. It's the brand of choice. On Amazon, it's a top seller on Amazon. I want to see that in my mind and let it manifest as my end goal, because that is going to really help me reverse engineer all the steps to get there and what I want it to look like. So one of the first things that I'll do is I take a personal inventory. So step one is personal inventory. Oh, let me get a better marker. This one's crap. Here we go. So look at that. Personal inventory. Okay, so personal inventory. Basically what that is I need to look at myself, my desires, my wants, my time. I need to know how much time I have to dedicate to this. I need to know my resources available. So that would be money and time. It would also be funding. So how much money do I have? It would also be untangible things such as the network I'm around. Who do I know that can help out? It would be, do I have a mentor that can assist with this? They don't actually have to be in the office furniture market or know anything about that, but something as simple as a relative or a friend who is a good businessman. If I have a 9-to-5 job and I'm a worker within the cogs, a mentor who has run a business and knows business and strategy is very, very beneficial. If they happen to be in office furniture, that's a bonus. And then finally, I also need to know my knowledge of the industry. Okay, how much do I know about office furniture? So a lot of inventors who come up with product ideas actually come up with ideas to solve their own problems, which is the best way. Scratch your own itch is what we call it. And if you're scratching your own itch, it means that you are subject to that problem. And a lot of people who work in certain industries are solving problems within their industry, which is perfect because you know a lot about the buying channels, you know about the industry, you know the insider view of how to get in there. Now, I have worked on office furniture product launches before. I worked with a company called Vecta, and they were a division of, I think, Steelcase, and this was years ago. So the people that I knew then, most of them won't be relevant today. It was years back, but I did understand and get to know the industry itself and the different buying channels, and I had to know and reverse engineer a lot of that. It's changed since then, so I'll have to go ahead and relearn it. However, you know, I don't have to have knowledge in the industry. It just helps a lot. And so I need to look at how much time do I have to spend on this? Well, currently, I don't have a lot of time to spend on this. So I don't want to put a lot of money into it until it gets to a certain point. I don't want to put a lot of my own money into it. I'd rather use someone else's money. And so I do have enough to get it through the first stage of production, which we'll go through that. And so I'll have enough money to get there, and then I can evaluate where I'm going to go from there. If I don't have the funds to even get to that step, I really have to second guess, or not second guess, I have to think about how I'm going to get this to market with no money. It can be done, but it's a lot slower. I'm going to have to do small chunks and bites and try to gain that money as we talked about. So these are the personal inventory aspects that I'm going to look at. I have enough in savings that I can get through building out my mock-up and testing it in the marketplace. And once I get through that stage, once I build out my own mock-up, which those were my own mock-ups, so I'm going to jump into that here in a second. And once I get through that stage, I'll have more confidence and figure out where I'm going to get money from there. So I also, one other thing that I didn't mention here, which is a little bit like this, it's also I want to look at my skills. What is it that I can bring to the table that I don't have to hire someone else to do, that I can do myself? And so I have graphic design background, I have all those different elements that I can bring to the table to build out. I have a workshop at home, I can make the rough Frankenstein mock-ups. The more skills you bring to the table, the less cost you'll have up front. So I'm starting with the end goal in mind. I've taken personal inventory, and then next thing I want to do is plan. So I'm going to start my planning process early. And in the planning process, I need to know and understand the 5 phases of development. And essentially, the 5 phases of development are a lot like when I said climbing the mountain. They would be akin to those being stops along the way. Each short pathway will have a stop at the end, and there are typically about 5 phases that I'm going to have to get through. And the reason that I need to know those phases are because it'll help me understand who I'm going to need and what I'm going to need to get from one phase to the other. I might have to sit still for a little while in one of my phases if I don't have the money to get to the other, or I haven't found the resources. But knowing the 5 phases is very important. Those 5 phases are that I'm going to need to get to the next phase. And those 5 phases I'm going to go through next, but for now, I'm going to start my planning. I know that I'm going to have 5 phases, that I need to surround myself with good people, and that I need to prepare for the worst. Prepare for the worst. Now, what I mean by that, so let me go into some detail on this. So the 5 phases, I'm going to actually be doing some research and testing on my own. Okay, I'm going to make my own mock-ups. I'm going to be going into the product development aspect, industrial design, concept drawings, engineering. I'm going to be going into the prototyping, and then manufacturing. Okay? See, the manufacturing, this is how I spell. Surround myself with good people. So what I'm going to start doing here is I already have a few network of people, but I'm going to actually be reaching out and try to find me some people within the office furniture industry that I can lean on and ask questions to. That takes some time, but I need to find someone that knows that industry. So I'll actually start by scouring the social media channels online. I'll be looking at industry leaders. I'll go to the associations and I'll do research as to who's who. I'll try to find association leaders who are in the overall organization of that industry that I can reach out to and just ask certain questions. I'll learn from their literature. What I'm really looking for is to just build some sort of a ad hoc advisory group that can help me get some more understanding of what I'm doing. And then prepare for the worst. The first thing I'm going to do is explain to my family I'm going to be taking on this new endeavor. Instead of me playing golf, I'm going to actually be working on this, a couple hours each evening and a few weekend nights and things like that. But I need to make sure that everyone is involved, knows what I'm going after, and that also it means that I need to know that if it really goes south, if I lose everything, I don't want to lose everything. I need to be able to mitigate the risk involved in this. And by me thinking through all of the steps and planning for disaster, just like when you're going on a mountain climbing hike, if I plan for disaster and I figure out where it could go wrong, I want to make sure that I don't have so much invested along the way that if it craters, my entire world comes down. So that's in the planning phases. I review that, and I went through that process. I already know this part, which is a benefit, and I'm going to go through those details. Good people, like I said. So I started looking at the associations, and I found a couple of furniture design forums and online private Facebook groups of people who are just obsessed with furniture. And there are subsets of those who make different really cool kinds of office furniture and designs, and I've started to network with those people. I don't have it solidified yet, but I'm starting to get to know who the players are, and through that communication and my involvement in those forums, I'm getting to know and build sort of a small little group of people that I'll know who to go to when I want to ask certain questions for. So I'm surrounding myself with good people right off the bat. And then prepare for the worst. Like I said, I just tell my wife I've got another project that I'm going to add in. I promise, it's only going to take this much time. I'm going to take it slow. This project's going to take 1 year to 2 years for it to manifest to where we have something to sell, unless something really cool happens. But I want to make sure she knows. And like I said, could I go and throw a bunch of money into this project and go right away into development and pay for all those things? Yeah, sure, I could do that. But I'm not going to. And the reason I'm not going to is because then that would dedicate a lot of my cash and my savings reserves that would put me into a situation that I don't want to be in. So what I'll do is I'll just carve out enough to get from one phase to the other, and I'll find phasing resources or phase resources as I go. And so I'm preparing for the worst. I'm going to mitigate my risk on that. So once that's done, then I'm going to go into the actual product development phase. Product development. So essentially, I've taken my personal inventory. I've seen my end goal. One last thing about that too is that at this stage, I give it a name. I call this the go-go desk, okay? Now, that might not be the end name, but I like to come up with a name early on because it breathes some life into the project early, and it's sort of like naming your child when it's born. It gives me more of a real emotional tie to it, a feeling that I get for it that I want to take a little more ownership of it. I'm actually, there's my baby, you know, and I've given her a name, and the go-go desk means something special to me. I've actually designed a logo for it already. That's kind of going too far at this stage, but you know, I used to be a graphic designer, so that's what I'm going to do. So I like to give them a name early on. So what am I going to do when I get started? What's the proper way to get started? Look at me sweat. I told you I really like this stuff. I'm getting all fired up. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to flesh out the idea. I need to flesh out the idea. As I said, I've had this in a sketchbook for a long time. I want to take it from the sketchbook and I want to get started on it. So sketches are part of that process. I've worked through a lot of problem solving in my sketchbook. I also came up with a lot of really cool functions and attributes for it, features and benefits that I think will really resonate with the public. Now, I won't launch all of those things until after maybe version 1 is out, and then I'll bring out a version 2. I already have ideas clear out to version 6.0 because I know that in early adoption, what I'm trying to do is I want to bring this product to market. That's my number one goal. And I could add stuff onto it all day long that drags it out and makes it more expensive, and it will not allow me to bring that to market. So I'm going to do the minimum viable product is what I'm going to bring to market. So I'll do all my sketches, do all my brainstorming, and then I will categorize those into this is a version 1. This is my minimum viable product. Version 2, version 3. I'm also going to do a mood board. So my mood board is really important because it provides the style for the aesthetics, and it also shows function. So in my mood board, of course, I had various tripods. I had video camcorder tripods. Couldn't use camera tripods because they're way too weak. I actually have the transit. What do they call that? You'll see the guys out on the highway and they're shooting line to gauge the rise and fall and the direction. I know the name of it, but I can't think of it right now. But those units are they're industrial, commercial strength. They're very good. There's a few mechanisms in there that I really like the way certain things work, the way the head turns. I like that it's a larger, more solid head. So I pulled graphics off of the internet. I also got some line art drawings. Essentially, I used that. I used skateboards. I have some different woods. I have all kinds of different elements that I create a mood board around what the feel, the look, the style, and a lot of the functionality is encompassing this, and I put it into a mood board. Then the next thing I do is I do my mock-up. And yes, I'm cheating off a board over here because I can't remember all of it at once. Come on. I'm usually not in front of a camera. I'm usually in the shop or working with clients. So my mock-up, some people call this a rough prototype or a mock-up. I call it a mock-up now because I want to tell myself basically that this isn't yet prototype level. So my mock-up is it's the Frankenstein that I made in my garage. It's just whatever tools and things that I had available to make it real, to go from the sketch to something real. So I had some wood, I had the tripod, I basically just screwed this to a piece of wood, the camera mechanism connector, and then I just connected this to the wood. It was so weak that it was just pathetic. I couldn't even, it was just standing there, and if I put a finger on it, it would bend over. So I hired a local machine shop to make me this plate. They made 2 different variations of this plate. I think these cost me $75 a piece, maybe $100 a piece. I just basically drew out on a piece of paper what I was looking for. They made a few adjustments, and then they developed these for me. And then that gave me the stability I was looking for, and also allowed me to play with some of the functionality of it. And so from that part, I was able to create my scope of work, my SAL, my scope of work. Now this is a very important document, right? This document is what I use throughout the entire process, and I will rewrite this document constantly. And basically my scope of work is an explanation of the product, details of how it works, and most importantly, why and who it's for. Why and who it's for. Essentially, what problem am I solving? So the scope of work is used when I go out and gather prices, and you'll be gathering prices, I'll be gathering prices for this project throughout the entire life of it. And I'll show you how that's a very important aspect, and it's really good to do. So once I have all these together, then last part of fleshing out the idea is that I need to go get some testing by customers, okay? Potential customers. So these aren't customers, I don't have anything to sell. But I need to go get some feedback on it. I need to go find out, does this, for lack of a better term, does this have legs? Yeah, it has legs. But what I really want, what I'm looking for is for potential customers to kind of take a look at it and say, give me honest feedback about the level of interest, level of interest, and also they gave me I took it to a coffee shop and I set it up and I started working on it, and people just started coming up and asking about it and where I got it, what it was, and I would just explain to them what I was working on, that I was there testing this idea. I'd love their feedback. The overall feedback that I got was resounding. Everyone was very, very interested in it. I had some people give me their name and number to follow along as I go with this, because they'd like to buy one later on. And more importantly, they gave me a lot of additional value through functions and things that I hadn't really thought of, or things to consider anyhow, that I got to add in there. So I was getting testing from a customer. I didn't go get testing from my wife or my friends. Those people have a vested interest, they care about me, and they're not a very good resource to get feedback. Now, of course, I've shown this to my wife and got her feedback, but I do not use the people who care about me. I don't use their feedback normally on projects. So I want to go get people who are likely to cut me a check, and better yet, maybe they will cut you a check. They'll give you some, a deposit down for pre-sale. It doesn't usually happen at that point, but it has happened before. Next thing I'm going to do, so I've fleshed out the idea, got my feedback, I've added it to my scope of work, reworked some sketches. Now I need to protect myself. Protect the idea. All right, so I didn't get protection. I didn't worry about that there. It's very difficult to bring a product to market. It's really hard. I mean, even experts have a difficult time. And so not very many people are going to go rip you off because they saw your idea. Once I get my feedback from people who are just normal, everyday, possible potential customers, I do want to have some protection, because now I'm going to have to go out into the professional market and expose it to people who do have those abilities. Now, I've run into very, very few, I've worked with very few service providers in the industry who who are into the ripoff. They just aren't. Their business is getting more inventors in the door and producing more projects. And so if they ripped off one or two people, that would spread like wildfire and nobody would be bringing them projects anymore. Now they do exist, and I'll explain later on where I'm going to protect myself, because the sharks and the unethical, vendors are out there, and you do need to have protection. And so what I want to do is I'm going to start to protect myself pretty early on. I have what's basically a mutual non-disclosure agreement. It's a standard form. We'll provide one here as a template. Mutual non-disclosure agreement just says that I'm not going to share information, that proprietary information with you, or I'm going to share it with you, but you can't use it, I won't use it. A mutual NDA, I like to provide my own instead of using theirs, because my lawyer drew up one that is more foolproof. Now, it doesn't necessarily protect you. The only thing that's going to protect you for real is going to court. If somebody does rip you off, and that's pretty expensive. So what we try to do is, again, I mitigate the risk as much as possible. This essentially just says, hey, I'm going to be ethical. You saying you're going to be ethical. It's a show of faith. It's a show of trust. I'm going to do research on patents. Okay, so go to the uspto.gov, and I'm going to use their new online search tools. Didn't have these way back when I got started. Doing research on the patents that are out there was a very difficult process. Now it's very easy. I also like to use the google.com/patents. It pulls from this database. It's a little bit more user-friendly to me. uspto.gov, even though it's way better, it gets better all the time, it still has a little bit of an interface deal, but the google.com/patents allows me to go see what's out there, what's already been patented. And what I'm looking for are things that are similar in the various forms and functions and serving the same industry. I'm looking for variations, ideas that I might be able to get to add to mine. They might not be in my product category at all. And so it might be in, heating, air conditioning units, but that particular mechanism, man, that would work really good in my application. And so I'm looking for all these things. And while I do this, I'm creating a file. I built a folder on Google Drive. I use Google Drive. You can use Box, whatever you guys want to use. I use Google Drive because it's very cost effective, and I can let anyone in there to take a look at my files, but I basically create a folder in the drive, and I call this prior art. And I download the PDFs of anything I find that I want to use. So I'm looking to see if somebody's already patented this idea. If somebody's already patented this idea, it's not dead yet. Okay, so if someone's already patented this idea, there are still some things that I could do. If I would have found this idea patented and I couldn't find it in the marketplace, I will contact the patent holder and I will find out what they're doing with it. If they're not pursuing it at all, then I might try to cut a deal with them where I'll try to get an exclusive license from them. I might try to buy the patent from them outright, but I'll try to, I love the idea and I love where it was going, so I'll try to go the next step into that. And by the way, there is a step up in here that I forgot to mention that I also do in my planning and preparation. And I can't believe I forgot it. I'm glad I remembered it, but I do market research. And when I'm doing market research, I'm essentially just looking for the different associations that are out there. I want to look and see what the size of the standing desk market is. Right? I want to know, is this a little industry or is it a big industry? And so a lot of the associations, like the Office Furniture Association, has market research that they have paid for. It's updated, and they had a 2018 market survey and size research document, but it was $3,500, and I wasn't going to pay that for that. So what I did was I took the name of that particular document, and then I did a search for it for one that was 3 or 4 years older. I found one that was in 2014 or 15, and which the standing desk market wasn't near where it is now, but I can use a lot of that information to help me put together a marketing plan later on. But what I was really looking for was just validation in how big was this market? How much do I want to put into this project and determine whether this is a good idea that I want to pursue versus maybe another idea I have. And so what I did find in the 2018, they gave me a summary and a size of market, and it was phenomenal, and it was growing at an exponential rate. And so with that particular just summary information, I put that into my scope of work and documented it. It gave me enough fuel to want to really pursue this idea. So when I get to this stage and I'm finding someone with possibly a patent already, it's still worth me pursuing it because he obviously hasn't done anything with it, and I can. And so I didn't find anything similar. I found variations in other areas, and I found all kinds of standing desk ideas and patents that are out there. 99% of them are not in the market. They're just patented, which I think is a foolish move. If you're going to patent something, if you made that decision, then you should probably pursue it, because patents don't make anybody any money unless you go license it. So I didn't find anything similar. I did find a lot of variations I was able to use. I created a Google Drive folder with prior art, and I started putting the PDF files in there. And when you do these patent searches, you'll notice that they'll have the description. I'll also add that to it, and then they'll have a PDF file of all the art, and I'll put that into that folder. And so I'm basically researching my patents, and then I actually made a provisional patent application. Now, provisional patent is a new tool that is sort of a precursor to a utility patent. You know, there's utility patents and design patents, and there's other patents as well, but I don't know what they are. I've never used them. I've only used utility and design. Provisional is a tool that just is essentially it's a low-cost way for me to make a very simple application with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. I think the cost for me was $175. I could be wrong on that, but it was less than $250 to make the provisional patent. I could do it myself. I just wrote a description of the product, all the different functions that I intended for it to use, and the unique claims that I have. And then I included 4 or 5 pieces of line art. And I mean, this is very simple stuff that I had a graphic designer do. It was just basically line art that demonstrated the tabletop and the legs, and then it demonstrated the tabletop and the legs apart. And it just had some sort of mechanism, because I don't have that all figured out, but it's a mechanism that makes it come together that can be adjustable. So we also will provide a couple of provisional patent templates that you can plagiarize from us, and you can submit a provisional patent, and this is a precursor to getting your utility patent done later on. The thing about the utility patents you really need to know is it is low cost, right? So it's low cost, doesn't cost you a lot of money, it's easy to use. Now it only lasts 12 months. So it basically protects me for 12 months. It says, you know, Robo stuck his flag in the ground for the tripod mobile standing desk on this date. And then I have 12 months from that date. They send me a application letter of acceptance, and then 12 months from that date, I will have had to submit my utility patent. I need to have the utility patent application completely created and submitted for application before the 12-month period is up. However, this 12 months gives me the time to do all my due diligence. So what I'll do is I will test the idea. I will go through a lot of the product development stages. I'll figure out what my cost of goods are. I'll try to find my funding. I'll go as far as I can in that 12 months to realize, okay, is this worth me actually spending what's probably going to be $10,000 to get a patent on. And I'll explain to you how that all went to shit along this way. However, I submitted and got a provisional patent, which is really why I'm sharing it with you at all anyways. It's one big reason. And it was very easy. It took me 4 hours, I think, 3 or 4 hours just to write it. And it was because I was pulling from other provisional patents and rewriting everything and adding in as much as I could. And then I had to send my rough sketches over to a graphic artist who made my line art renderings. Put the provisional patent in, got my letter of acceptance back. It doesn't mean that I have a patent. It's just patent pending. It doesn't mean that I'm going to get a patent, because that also is unknown. Utility patents don't mean you're going to get a patent. The application process is long and drawn out. It might be 2-3 years before you actually get your patent accepted and it's actually patented and your patent number issued. So it takes quite a long time. All this is, like I said, it's a flag in the ground with a number on it that says, I was here first. And I haven't even proven that I was here first. Somebody else might have done it a week before me. I can't research provisional patents. In fact, no application that's under the investigation or under the process is going to be in this database. So you have no idea who's already beat you to this. Just ask that woman who invented the telephone. So, protecting myself, I got my provisional patent. And so the other thing that I'm going to do, and this is probably the most important aspect, is that my documentation and journaling. My journal. I keep a journal for all my projects, and I document everything. If I correspond with anyone, I prefer to do it via email, because then I can document what was said back and forth. And email is admissible in court. I've never had to use it for, per se, so I don't know all the details on that. But I do know my lawyer says just keep track of everything in your email. So I document everything that's being said. So if I'm getting pricing from someone, I always do it via email. If there's change requests, I never do it over the phone. I always do it in email. I try to really keep track of a thread of communication so that I can document who said what when. That way, if I ever need to, which I hope, knock on wood, I won't, that I can go back to that and actually show proof of who said what and the date it was said, and document what I'm working on. I also keep a handwritten journal that gives me an overview and a timeline of the things that I'm working on. So these are really good tools to use. So I protect my idea, and I've gone way too long onto that, so I'm going to speed it up. So once I've done that, now I need to find out what my financial needs are going to be. How much is this going to cost me, right? So this happens to be one that is just an ongoing open question, but I can start looking into this now. I already know that I'm going to need certain things, so I've already, I'm doing my mock-up, right? Well, my mock-up cost me money, even though it wasn't much. It was just a few tripods. I bought 4 or 5 tripods off of, Craigslist. I invested into a couple $100 into the parts and pieces, but, by the end of the day, that's going to run me, let's say, $700 in just getting my mock-up put together. And I like to break out my financial needs into kind of 3 areas. And so my 3 areas are, I should have done that first, is pre-production, production, and post-production. It helps me kind of categorize it. Post-production. So pre-production's my mock-ups, my patents, all those different things. If I had to buy any research, I might have even taken a step and gone to a trade show, take a look around. So those are all the things that I'm doing pre-production. My production, obviously, is going to be my concept art. It's going to be my engineering. It's going to be my prototypes. My manufacturing costs, my shipping, all that. And then what I call post-production, that's my operations, that's my marketing and sales, that is my overhead, all those elements. So this helps me just kind of categorize what I'm looking for. And so along the way, I'm going to be gathering prices along the way. And the farther I go, the more fine-tuned those will be. But by gathering early, it helps me manage this process. So step one is that I create a financial sheet. It's basically a financial blueprint sheet. What I call a blueprint. I call mine the bean counter. So my bean counter has several different tabs. I've got one that's basically my product costs. I have one that is my operations. I have one that is my P&L. I have one that is my overhead. And essentially, I'm sorry, not overhead. This is my launch costs, my launch. Because P&L will end up being my ongoing monthly costs. So production costs will have several different layers in there, but I won't go into any of that detail because that takes me a long time, and I've gone into detail later on in the actual academy course. But these are the things that I keep track of. I keep track of what's it gonna cost me to do all of my product development, all of the concept art, engineering, all that stuff. What are my operations? I've got to pay for accounting software eventually. All those things are going to cost me money. Now, they're not costing me money now, but that's what I just want to know what those are going to be. These are my projections, basically. That way, if I know, this is that planning thing, if I know what's coming up, then I can plan for it now. If I know that there's my first initial order is probably going to be my biggest cost, I need to plan for it well ahead, and I'll start to gather those costs as I can. Now, one thing I'll leave before so I create this spreadsheet and I gather costs. I literally will do some research and I'll find an industrial designer, and I'll just go right into that. I'll go into the 6 steps. So let's just move on. So I want to know what my financial needs are, and so I go into the actual product development, the development part of product development, right? So let's switch pages. We'll go back and forth. So now I'm getting ready to start pursuing product development. All right, so I've tested the idea. I've put together my own internal resources and what I'm able to bring to the table. I've put together some protection so that as I go forward, I can do this. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going into the product development phase. So the first step in my product development phase is that I need to take my rough concept idea and I need to get some concept art made, okay? So what I want to do is essentially, concept art is a 3D rendering of my idea. So it's a 3D model, and I call this the virtual prototype. Right, so it's my virtual prototype. It's on the computer. You can print it out. An industrial designer knows what they're doing. It'll rotate. I can see it from all angles. And what I'm looking for is I sit down with a industrial designer. So I'm looking for an industrial designer, right? And what I did was, in this particular case, I got online and I researched industrial designers on Upwork and found hundreds. And then I also went to a design directory. It had a whole bunch. The Upwork platform had a lot of freelancers, which is what I was looking for. My methodology for going through this process was, do I want to use a freelancer or do I want to use like a boutique firm? And there's also a third option, which is the larger corporate big firms, but they're way outside of my price range. I don't want to hire someone like that and use all my money for their overhead. I'm going to look at these two, and how I determine between a freelancer and a a boutique firm. Boutique firms are usually a bunch of freelancers who are really, really good, got together and started their own little agency. And there'll be 4, 5, 6 guys, guys and girls. And they basically have come together and shared their skill sets. I might have a couple of industrial designers, an engineer, they might have a project manager on board. So they offer a more well-rounded platform of services, and they're really great to work with. They're my number one choice to work with, are the small boutique firms, because through one channel I can get a lot done. Now the freelancer is my cheapest option. If I'm really, really hurting for money, I need to go with the freelancer. I don't have any other choice. They'll usually do it by project or by hour, and I really like to nail them down by project, because they could take much longer than it really takes to get the project done if they're on by hour. So I like it to nail them down, and the way I nail it down, and before I even decide on all this, is that I take my scope of work. Remember, my sketches, my scope of work, my mood board, and all of my documentation and notes. And I give that to them, and I say, I want to know how much to develop the concept art for this particular project. Now, if it's a freelancer, I looked at the freelancers and I went through all their portfolios, and I looked for a couple of key things. One, I looked for the style that I was looking for. I wanted to find someone that had, a really good flavor that matched what I was looking for in my mood board. And I was looking for someone who did consumer goods, not someone who did a lot of industrial work, but I wanted them to have consumer good experience. I wanted them to have some sort of relationship with wood, working with metal, and having some sort of electronic components in it. That way, in mechanics, that way they may never have designed anything like this, but I know they can, because they have that skill set. And so I'm looking for really high quality level portfolio, and the only way to do that is to go through a lot of them. And what's really interesting, as you'll start going through portfolios, you'll get better and better and better at finding you'll start flying through them. You take a quick look, you go, nope, that one's out. Ooh, that one looks really cool. And you'll start to get better at that. And then I sift those down to maybe my top 2 or 3. I contact them, and I invite them into the project. You create a project, put my scope of work in there, put all my drawings in there, my mood board, and then I invite them in and to get bids on the project. And I basically hire a concept artist who also was an engineer, which was a double whammy, because that concept designer also can do my engineering, right? So he was a materials engineer who went back and got his industrial design degree. And actually, I don't think he got an industrial design degree. He was an engineer who just had this really beautiful artistic style. And because he was an engineer, he was able to provide my engineering drawings, my blueprints, and my bill of materials. And he pulled it right out of his art. All these software packages are pretty amazing these days. And so he gave me the drawings and a bill of materials, which is every part and piece in the thing. So he's working on the iteration right now. We've come up with 5 or 6 changes we were making, which is really nice. It's all virtual. So he goes in and he makes adjustments on the fly. And then he continues to update the drawings and the bill of materials. So this is important, because sometimes I'll find my concept artist isn't an engineer, and so I'll have to bring an engineer in, or most of the time they know an engineer. They've worked with them before. I'd never hire somebody who hasn't actually made a product. I can't tell you how important that is. They need to have made something, and they need to have made something from start to all the way to finished product good. And there's a lot of them out there who are out of school who have not been through those processes, or they come out of school and they go to work for a big firm, and they never have their hands dirty. They never go out and they have to make the prototypes. They never are part of that process of manufacturing. They've never been in a manufacturing plant. And so they only do their job, they hand it off to someone else. I want somebody who has been through the entire stage and knows everything about it, and they're going to help me keep out of trouble, because somebody in here has got to be an expert at this. And so luckily I found one that did both, fit both my needs. We kicked it off. Like I said, what I did was I sent my basically my request for proposal, and it included my sketches, my mood board, all those different elements, and then they came back with a price. I actually got a price for individual freelancers, and then I went to a couple of boutique firms, and I got true price quotes for the same job from boutique firms, right? And they came in, they were about 40% higher than me doing it through freelancers. However, the 40% might have been well worth it because they also have contract manufacturing that they can go to. They had, a project manager that can oversee everything. If I had if I wanted to spend the extra money on this stage, then I would have went with the boutique firm. But also I did something else. I asked if they were interested in creative compensation. I said, would you be willing for creative compensation? I'll give you, I think I went with 8% of my gross sales up to $1 million. No, it wasn't. It was 500,000. I forget, because I've done 4 or 5 contracts in the last couple of months. So essentially I went to him and I said, hey man, if you do this, I'm going to give you, I can only, I want to discount your fee. What would you do if I gave you 8% and up to a certain amount? Your take home on that is going to be, I don't know what the math is. You have to do the math. Your take home is going to be much, much greater than if I just pay you a couple $1,000s to do my work. And so what he did was he took the deal, and this cost me $0 to get that stage done, which was a very important stage. He did both aspects. It didn't cost me any out-of-pocket money, but I will have out-of-pocket money later on. So it's a risk-reward factor. He's going to make a lot more on the back end, and I don't have any money into it up front. I need to look up that number so that you guys can follow that example. These two, I offered to these firms here, and one of them was fairly interested, but had such a high workload that they backed out, and the other one didn't do business like that. And I hadn't done business with them before. I was able to do this job right here because of my back track record and my resume and portfolio. He believed in it enough that he was willing to take that risk. And if it all keeps going the way it is, he'll probably be a very reliable resource for me going forward. So essentially I got my concept art underway. Engineering drawings are all underway. I will take this particular package, and I will make adjustments to my scope of work. And now I'll go to the next phase, which is my actual manufacturing costs. My cost of goods, right? So what I'm looking for is I'm going to research and find manufacturers that can help me make my desk. I'm not going to go use a desk manufacturer. There are a lot of desk manufacturers, both in the US and overseas. The ones in the US are very expensive right now, and I could not be able to bring this to market in the price point that I want. And so I've chosen to go to Asia to get this done. And a lot of people fear Asia because of the quality, but quite honestly, they can produce really good quality if they're asked, and if you have a quality control program set in place. And so what I've done is I actually have contacts from the past who are going to help me with the manufacturing aspect. You can use a broker. They'll take a cut, but they protect you from having to go. You don't have to go overseas and tour manufacturing plants and spend all that money these days. That's kind of the old methodology. I've produced, millions of dollars worth of products that sold in the market and have never stepped foot in Asia. And the new technology, the contacts, the people in place over there, the network is such that you don't have to anymore. Now, At some point you may want to, but in this process you don't have to. You don't have to go tour these factories. And in fact, you can do a lot of stuff all virtual now. It's very seamless. So I had a choice here. I was either going to use a broker, someone who, you know, basically represents the factories in Asia, but they're here in the United States and they're U.S. citizens. This is a fairly safe way to do business over there. It's not completely. You have to do a lot of your due diligence and research on them. I actually used an old industrial design firm that I used to use. Set me up with a manufacturer. They are actually partners in this manufacturing plant. They're not involved in the development of the project, but they're going to help me get the manufacturing done. So I sent them the scope of work, the engineering drawings, the bill of materials, and the virtual prototype, and they sent me back my first estimate, right? So they sent me my first cost estimate, and basically this was, I wanted, what is a working prototype going to cost? Working prototype. What is the cost of goods? I wanted to know what the shipping was, but I held that back, and I'll explain that in a second. And what's their minimum order quantity? Okay, so what they're going to ask me is, they're going to take a look at all of this information, and they're going to get a fairly pretty good idea of what my working prototype is going to cost. And the way they priced my working prototype, it was labor plus materials. So I wanted it that way. I wanted to know what the materials were going to cost, what the labor was going to cost. I wanted it broken out separately. That way I know that if I get this one made and then I need to get another one and another one and another one, I can extrapolate two things. One is I know that my labor costs are going to go down a little bit because they're going to get better and faster at making my prototypes, and I can negotiate that, as well as my materials. When they broke out the materials separately, they also provided me with how many prototypes, number of prototypes, will that much material get me? Now, because they're going to be buying this from a supplier, they're going to be buying my tabletop design, which we're going to make the first ones out of a bamboo. They're going to be buying it in certain minimum quantities themselves. They might be able to buy one sheet, but that one sheet could make 10 prototypes. So I wanted to know how many prototypes this could make. And right there, that saved me a ton of money. This particular process is going to save me a lot on prototyping. I'm not going to go in and pay $15,000 a prototype every single time when I know I'm going to have to make several of them, several iterations to get it. So I broke it down into the smaller chunks so that I could manage my future prototypes, because there will be several. The working prototype phase is usually the longest phase. They're going to make a prototype, you know, in their shop, and it's not going to be made with tooling or the dies or anything we'll use later on. It's basically just handmade. And the first one they make is just a working prototype for fit and function. They're going to do a good job. It'll look way better than this, but it's not going to be perfect. There's going to be gaps. There's going to be bends that aren't going to be right. There's going to be hand welded elements to it. They're basically making it as close as they can. And the first one is pretty rough. And then, so from that one, I'll make my red lines. So I'll do all my red lines to that working prototype. And once I have all my red lines, there might be 10, there might be 10,000 red lines. And just depending on the complexity of my project. And since we're talking about this one, I don't estimate that there's going to be a lot of red lines on this. We're going to try and source as many standard parts as we can, but not too many, because I want some customization to this to help me protect myself in the market. I want to be able to create some innovation into it that doesn't exist anywhere else. And so I only get a few of the pieces and parts. They'll make all the rest, custom make all the rest. The working prototype, in a lot of instances, there'll be several pieces on there. They're just going to 3D print, and that'll save me cost as well. And so as we go through, the working prototype number 1, kind of rough. Number 2, better. Number 3, better yet. And we'll go through that process until the final prototype. The final prototype essentially means we can't do any better on this prototype than we have until we make tooling for it, until we get it set up the actual manufacturing plant to produce these and stamp them out in the highest quality there is. Once we reach that stage where the only things left that are able to be fixed will be in that stage, then I sign off on the final, and then I'll order my master sample, and I'll talk about that in a second. And so in the manufacturing, I'm just getting my cost of goods put together. So they're able to tell me, so they ask me right off the bat, well, how many do you want? And so I go back to them and say, well, how many do I have to order? I want to know the minimum quantity. And they say, well, you know, they're not even going to set their shop up for, you know, less than 100. And I just want them to come to the table and say, it only makes sense in us buying the raw materials and us setting up our shop and the time it takes to do any less than 100, you know, 250 or 1,000 or whatever. The better contact I have with the manufacturer, the more I can negotiate this part. Because yeah, they could make one, but it's going to cost me $250,000. They're going to get their money out of it somehow, because they're not really sure if I'm ever going to order 2. You know, they're not sure if I'm going to order. If they tell me their minimum quantity and they're really risking it and saying, hey, 200 of these is what we're going to do them for minimum, that's a risk on their part, because I may never order more. And so those 200, they're going to put the price into it. So the minimum quantity, they'll actually reverse engineer a lot of stuff. I'm getting too deep into a lot of these things. I just want you to know that they're going to want to know my minimum quantity. I know that I can sell 1,000 of these buggers without even in my sleep, so I asked for 1,000, and then they provided me what the actual cost is going to be for my product, and it was $125 roughly to order 1,000. So it's 125 each. And so this is the tooling costs are going to be they weren't. They were 25K. So they're 25,000. This is something that a lot of new inventors always overlook, is they get a cost of goods and they know what their minimum quantity is, but they don't account for their tooling, and it costs money to make the molds and dies and things like that. That's going to be a line item that you've got to pay attention to. So once I got this part all determined from my manufacturer, then I came back around later and I said, well, how much for shipping, you know, door to door from his plant to my office? I want to know what it's going to cost me to get to my office. And a lot of people, I can actually have it shipped to Houston. I can go pick it up at the Houston, and I'll look at that later on. I want to see what he's going to charge me. Didn't get that price right off the bat because I want him to not package that into his price, which they'll often do that, and they'll use shipping as a revenue model. And I don't like shipping to be used as a revenue model. I'll actually go out and I'll shop the shipping with import-export people. There's a lot of import-export people here in the United States. I just give them the size of my packaging, the number of packages, and the weight and all the different variables. They'll walk you through that entire process, and they'll give you different options to have your product shipped over here. So I'll get a shipping price from my manufacturer, and I'm going to get a second one from an import-export company, and I'm going to go with the one that makes the most sense. And lowest price is not always the one that makes the most sense. One other thing that I'm going to have to account for is my packaging. Another overlooked one. So it's going to cost money. I want this to come in a really cool box, and I want it to be an experience. And so I'm going to design my own packaging and craft it, and then they're going to produce it because they have cheaper printing over there and they can basically make anything. But I'm going to have it designed here and then send all of the work there. So in your packaging phase, if it's something that they can do, and they have so many capabilities just right out of the box. They can do the packaging for you and provide you with, clamshell, foam, paper, cardboard, whatever. But this is going to have a cost associated with it. So this is my cost of goods, or these are my cost of goods that I'm going to put into my financial spreadsheet. And now I'm getting a better understanding of what this thing's really going to cost me. And so I'm doing this part on my manufacturing level. I've already got my drawings done. I've already got my engineering blueprints, my BOM. I have sourced manufacturing. I'm getting pricing from 3 different manufacturers. I've asked them for the same thing in all instances. I won't just use price as my decision point. I'll choose from who has the experience and whom do I trust. I'm looking for trust. I am going to do some due diligence on past customers. I'm going to call people that they have made things for in the past. And I actually went through their online portfolio and found those people. I didn't ask them for a list of references. I'm going to do my own references because I want to find the people they're not going to give me. I want to find the people that are going to say, oh my God, they took my idea and ran, whatever. So I'm doing my due diligence on this to save my ass later on. So gathering my estimates, I'm looking for their capabilities. You also want to take a look at, and just saying US versus, I'll say overseas when I really should just say not US, but overseas is pretty much the go-to place right now. We used to do a lot of stuff with Mexico. Maybe some people still do in certain industries, but mostly I just go overseas, or I get pricing from here in the US. Because there are a lot of instances where the US, if they're at least close, if they're within, let's say 20-25%, I'll probably go with a US firm because I'll save money on my shipping, I'll save time on my communication and the back and forth that it takes. Sometimes doing these working prototypes, if you do several, it takes months, and they go on they have more, national holidays than you'll ever see here. So there's a lot of advantages to US. There's a lot of quality involved, things like that. I have better, communication with them. Plus, I can use the made in US factor. However, it wasn't that way. I got 2 prices from US firms, and they were 1,100% more than getting it done overseas. I can't make that decision to do that right now. Now, that may change in going forward, but that's the way it is right now. And so because that's the way it is, I'm still a businessman. I'm still coming to market, and that's what will happen. Hopefully in the future, I'll be able to, once I get up and rolling and selling product, I can bring on a manufacturing expert or project manager, production manager on my team, and they can help out with bringing those costs down. So now I've got all my costs ready, and I know what those are going to be. I added them back to my spreadsheet. And essentially, now I can make some really, really strong choices. I can make decisions, and the biggest decision I'm going to be making right now is all of this process going on. During this entire step-by-step, I was reviewing what my costs were going to be. I got a bid from the concept artist who was also the engineer, right? Which was 0. So I was able to go through that process without any capital spend. But let's say it wasn't. Let's say it was going to cost me, $2,000, and depending on complexity, maybe 25,000. Who knows? I've seen worse. I've seen 50, 60, 100. It could be, if your invention is a helicopter, good Lord. But so depending on my costs here, what my real cost would be, I have to make financial funding decisions all along the way. Knowing these things as I go helps me make those decisions. So if it was going to be less than, say, $5,000, I knew that I was going to be able to use my own money. And my sources for money, my sources that I look to are obviously personal. Well, maybe I'll do it over here. Money sources. So personal, friends and family, the number one source. Angels, traditional. I think it's called institutional. This would be your banks. I call it banks. Personal is savings. And also, I have to admit, I've done it. Savings and credit cards. Friends and family, my rich uncle. Okay. And then there's also government grants that you can go look at. And there's also, what do they call it? It's where someone will buy your purchase orders. These are all options. Now, you can also have VC, but I'm telling you that VC, in the VC game, I'm going to have to be down the road a ways. These all have their pros and cons, and obviously, you know, if I'm doing it personally, that's really the best way. If I can afford to get through this process personally without reaching out for anyone else, I don't have to give up equity, I don't have to give up royalties, I get more in the long run. The likelihood that most people, most individual inventors can do that is pretty low. You're going to want to get as far as you can on your personal money. Maybe you've got extra cash flow from your job. Maybe you've got a giant savings account that you put together that you were going to buy a boat with and decide to do this instead. Invest in this instead. And I say invest. So you make money later on. You know, whatever the reason is that, you know, personal will get you certain, you know, down the road a ways. But for me to get through just this very simple project and down and out the back door, this is going to cost me, you know, over $100,000 because of my tooling, my packaging, the shipping, the actual getting 1,000 units made. And they are at, what did I say they're $125. So you can see that adds up. And that's money that I'm going to have to come up with. Unless I can work out different details. So I'm going to take as far as I can with my personal savings. I already showed you one of our key items, which was the most consistent, successful inventors know how to find and hire the best people with little to no money. So I hired one with no money. They also know how to find money they need to get through the hard times. And so I'm getting down this pathway a long ways. I'm putting together a hell of a good, accurate estimate. Now, I'm going to keep going back. As we go through the working prototype phase, I will continue to get updates on the costs here because they might go down, they might go up, and more importantly, as the manufacturer gets more familiar with my particular project, they might bring the pricing down, they might push it up. So, friends and family is your next best resource. Typically, friends and family and personal will get you through your original, remember I said your original part, which is doing your research and your own rough mock prototype. And then also it can help you get in through the concept art and the engineering phase to where you can start to put together these. Once you have the drawings and the bill of materials, you can get these put together. And now you really know you have a hard set of numbers that you're looking at conquering. So you might have someone in your friends and family network that you can put together your presentation. If you're getting outside money, you need to have a pitch presentation. You've seen Shark Tank. Okay, it's not Shark Tank. Presentation. It's not Shark Tank. Okay, so first of all, Shark Tank is, I think it's like friends that have gone through that process, I think it's like over an hour that you present, and then they cut it all down to just little 5-10 minute segments, so you're not seeing what's really going on. There's actually a methodology to doing your pitch presentation, and it usually has a slide deck. It has an overview sheet or an executive sheet. just a one-sheeter that explains the whole thing, and then you need to have some sort of your package. You know, what is it that I'm asking, how much I'm asking for. Put this together. I recommend putting these together right away anyways, because it not only helps me solidify my business model, but if I'm going to pitch to my friends and family, I still want to have all this together. This is going to have my financial in there, my business model, the reason why I'm doing it, the solution that I'm providing, how big the market is, will all be part of my pitch presentation. And I want them to be comfortable in giving me their money. I'm only going to get money from people who can afford to just throw it away. If my uncle was going to go gamble it in Las Vegas versus giving it to his nephew, that's who I'm going to hit up. I'm not going to hit up any family member who's going to be completely leveraged and out of, you know, that's just a disaster. Angels, there are angels who, if you have a really good program put together, they'll give you what's called seed money. This is seed capital I'm looking for. There's pre-seed, seed, Series A, B, C, blah, blah, blah. I'm not an investment expert. I have people that I rely on to handle all that. I can put the business model together. I can help pitch it and put a pitch deck together. But as far as putting the packages and knowing the financial aspects, I'm not that guy. So when I'm looking for, you know, pre-seed means that I'm before I'm actually making product. It's usually going to be me. It's going to be friends and family, and there'll be some angels that want to get involved in it. I'm not a big fan of the institutional route. All these people, the personal savings, F&F, angels, the venture capitalists, those people are playing on a risk reward. They know that they're putting a risk in there. They're going to get their money out of it because of that risk. The traditional institutions, they're not risk reward. They're going to take your property. They don't believe in losing. So I'm not a big fan of them. And so you might have a relationship with your banker. You might be able to leverage something. I don't know, but normally these are the ones that are working with you in these stages. Once you get in the market and actually selling product, then the venture capitalists really come in, because now you're able to put a valuation on your project, and it opens it up to seasoned venture capitalists who can see they can see momentum, and they can know and understand the business model better once you have sales. And so putting this package together to get my funding when I need it is a very, very important aspect. And so right now what I'm doing is, like I said, I've gotten all the way to this part right here. I know what my costs are. We're still working out the engineering drawings, and we've not begun work on the working prototype phase. So I'm going to know within the next week what my labor and materials are going to cost for my working prototypes. Once I have that information, then I'm going to make some decisions on where I go get some money. Okay, and so what I've also built out my pitch deck, putting my financial plan together, because I just got these numbers in and I'm adding them to this. I already know my market size, I already know my solution and why I came up with it, because I scratched my own itch, and I just have to flesh out some of the details. Then I'll take that along with what I'm looking for, and I'm going to have an investment a financial advisor help me put the package together and go pitch it. I'm going to go pitch it to some angel groups. I have a couple of small angel groups that are just ad hoc angel groups. It's like 10 professionals, veterinarians, and doctors who've gotten together and made a little fund that they get behind things with, and I'm going to go pitch it to them as a potential investment package for them. And so you can find angel groups in your local area just doing some research and searches. You may have to travel to a larger metroplex area. We have 2 or 3 or 4 right here in Fort Worth, Dallas, Texas. There's half a dozen in Austin and Houston. So they're out there. You may have to go there. There's also all kinds of organizations now that do that. One other one that I completely forgot, I can't believe I forgot it. It fits right in here between F&F and Angels, and that's the crowd fund, right? So you thought I was completely forgetting it, which I did. But the reason I forgot it is not because it's not applicable to this. This is actually perfect for this. It's that most of the project we work with don't fit well with the crowdfunding platform. You have to understand, crowdfunding is not for every project. It has nothing to do with the crowdfunding platforms and their viability, although there are a lot of dangers involved in that and a lot of failure out there that nobody knows about. But if done correctly, it can get you where you need to go. It can get me where I need to go. But it has to meet certain criteria. And because the crowdfund platforms typically have a demographic, the majority of them are young professionals, and they're very, very tech savvy. If you look on the top selling products, it's going to be smartwatches, it's going to be backpacks, it's going to be Dungeons and Dragons games, and a lot of tech hardware. And so that's what really gets funded there the most. Now there's all kinds of outliers. There's people who've gotten funded that don't make any of that stuff and done well in the funding aspect. But you have to be aware of the pros and cons of that. This may fit that bill. I'll only know that once I get done with my business model. However, when you do go seek crowdfunding, one of the biggest mistakes, and I'm just going to give you a warning on this, is that people seek it too early. What they'll do is they'll do like I said before. Remember when I said, I need to get a prototype, and how much is it going to cost me, to manufacture it? And unethical manufacturers will give you a price for both, right? And so you get one of these made, you get a prototype made. So I can go to a prototype shop. I can have my friends help me make one. There are professional prototyping co-ops now. There's all kinds of ways to get prototypes made that aren't through the manufacturer. And we do use that as a step often. I didn't have to do that with this particular project, so I didn't go into detail on that, but I can go get a prototype made right here down the street through a firm down here that makes prototypes. And they can do this prototype. It was a little more expensive, but they would have made me one. They would have been handmade, and it would have cost me XYZ, right? So let's say they made me a prototype, it cost me $1,000. But now I have a pretty good working prototype. It was made by professionals. It doesn't look so handmade like mine. And the manufacturer gave me a price to produce these for $80, right? So because I didn't provide engineering drawings and bill of materials and done all of this background work, his estimates weren't accurate, right? So he bids me $80 because he knows that I don't know what I'm doing. So then I jump, and normally this is where people jump on Kickstarter, and they go do their Kickstarter campaign. They know it's going to cost them $80, so they're selling them for $160. Discount deal. Once this is all over, these are going to be $200, right? In reality, so I do my Kickstarter, I get funded, but that's, less than 40% actually succeed in getting funded, and less than 40% of those deliver, which means that they failed after they got their funding. The reason they fail is because these were wrong numbers all the way across the board. They assumed that there would only be one prototype. I'm telling you, I'm going to guess that I'll be doing 6 prototypes for this project. So they completely got all of their numbers wrong. They didn't account for their tooling costs. They didn't account for their packaging. They maybe have accounted for their shipping. This is across the board. I'm just saying this is where people get it wrong, is that they don't get all of these things accounted for all the way through the stage. And just before I'm trying to get as much of this done, I want to work through all of my 6 prototypes. It's just an estimate, but it might be more. I want to work through all of my working prototype all the way to my final prototype, okay? I want to sign off on my final prototype. I want to know what my tooling costs are going to be. I want to have a final price on tooling after I've signed off on this. They're going to give me final tooling pricing. They're going to give me final cost of goods for various quantities, right? So I want to get his minimum order quantity is 1,000. So I want to get pricing for 1,000, but then I'm going to get it for 2,000 and 5,000, right? So I can project out into the future what my profitability is going to be. These every time I go higher in my quantity, they're going to come down in price. So my original cost is going to be $125. I'm going to 6x it. So whatever that is, that's 725, right? 725. So that actually is my retail price, and there's a reason for that. Now, I can play with that. I have a lot of room. There's a lot of profit margin in there. So if I want to come out and do a discount offer on my Kickstarter, I can drop that way down to, let's say, $350, and I'll still make profit. Right there. I'll still make profit over my 125 costs. And I'll be able to make my second order. Most of the time, they don't even have enough to make their initial order because they got this all wrong. But if they did get it right, they don't price it enough to have enough profit to build a business around it and make another container load order. And so I'm going to make a pricing methodology that's going to fit all that. And so this pricing methodology is worked out in my financial sheet that we did earlier. I have this pro forma financial sheet that's an ongoing sheet. There's a copy of it in our academy. So as I'm building out my financial blueprint and my sheet, taking into consider all of my costs that are in every area, I'm updating it constantly. We're reviewing it for profitability. I'm adding it in and out of my projections. I'm adding it in and out of my launch costs. After my launch costs are done, I know that I'm going into my monthly overhead. And so this is the plan for taking the desk from concept all the way through. Now it sounds extremely complicated because it kind of is. And this is really just an overview brush stroke, albeit a really deep one. And so I just want to thank you for taking the time to go through this with me. A lot of the elements in here are going to change depending on the complexity of your project. And but if you go into the academy, which we'll discuss later on, but if you go into the academy, you're going to get a lot more detail into every one of these steps, and then you'll be able to go back through and simplify it into working model. We have a planogram that walks you through the step-by-step procedure, helps you make better decisions, and helps you make sure you're not missing something. And so I hope you enjoyed this part of the presentation, and we're going to go into phase 3. Boom.